A big mistake that some people make, and I'm always blown away when I see this, but I probably shouldn't be surprised, is people think that just saving is enough. You can't just save the money. It has to be invested the right way because inflation will eat away at your buying power. The name of the game with investing, people think it's a common misconception that in order to be successful with investing is you need to achieve the highest possible returns. That is wrong. You need the equivalent of singles and doubles somewhat consistently in order to achieve your goals. Survivorship buyers. People love to share the winners, the people that have winning businesses and took a lot of risk, but no one mentions all the losers that they have. You don't need anything special to be successful investing. What you need to do is you need to stick to plain vanilla investments, you need to stick with it over the long term, and you need to ignore the noise. That's it. And if you're able to do that and stay consistent with that, you'll do very, very well financially.
What is the most important money move you're going to make in the new year, 2026?
The most important thing, and what I do every single year at the beginning of the year in January, is
When Jonathan Shenkman joined us in 2024, his episode went absolutely viral. His words have shaped the way so many of you think about saving, investing, and with God's help, creating success. A year later, the world feels a bit different. Markets have shifted, priorities may have evolved, and wisdom like his feels even more valuable than it did a year ago. So he's back in the Living L'Chaim studio. He's clear, he's thoughtful, and laser focused on what matters in 2026. This conversation you're about to listen to is practical, grounded, and full of golden money nuggets. I'm Ellie Langer, and welcome to Kosher Money. Jonathan Shenkman, what is the most important money move you're going to make in the new year, 2026?
the most important thing, and what I do every single year at the beginning of the year in January, is make sure that I'm paying myself first. When I first started my career, one of the biggest piece of advice and the best piece of advice I got from somebody is I was debating whether I should contribute to my 401k or not. And at the time, I was not making a tremendous amount of money. And he said, Jonathan, just trust me on this advice. Make sure you're taking money and putting into your retirement account. If you don't see it in your checking account, you won't spend it, you won't see it, and you'll figure out a way to live on less. So every year, since 18 years it's going on now, January, sit down, make sure that I'm putting them in the max into my retirement account. And then the other goals, which I'll go through, I make sure that I have a system to add money to those accounts as well. That's rule number one. It allows you to save for your financial future and also spend guilt-free with the money that you'll have left over after expenses.
I have such a hard time seeing liquidity, seeing cash in my checking account or even a savings account. I need it to be in a place that I legitimately can't touch without some level of punishment or friction. Am I unusual?
You're not unusual. That's most people, and that's American society at large. You see money, you want to spend it. Even if you don't have money and don't see it, you can use a credit card to keep spending money. That's why if you take money, earmark it every year, move it into your retirement account, then you won't see it, and you'll have to figure out how to make it work on less. Obviously, you don't want to take out a credit card debt or anything like that. But if you're saving any year the max that you can, that's a great start. For me personally, I'm a little bit unique in that I get paid only 4 times a year. Pretty much my inflow of cash based on the way my business is run and based on how my clients are charged is I get an inflow of cash 4 times a year. After my first payment at the end of January, I take the money immediately and I put it into my retirement account. So last year, that was $23,500, immediately goes into my retirement account. There's nothing to think about. And then I set up a system with the other goals that I save for, and I make sure I'm automating contributions every month into those accounts.
So, what do you do for those that don't know and why do you have such a quirky income model?
I think it's standard for the industry. Many people in my industry, they're charged on a quarterly basis.
For those that don't know who you are, you might
Yeah.
be a fireman and they're
Yeah.
wondering.
So I'm a money manager, financial advisor at my own firm, Parkbridge Wealth Management. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And the way it typically works is clients pay a percentage of assets under management. It's typically charged on a quarterly basis. And that's why most of my fees come out quarterly. Not everyone has the same structure. Not every financial advisor, not every client, but typically, by and large, that's the way it works.
So 23,500 is every quarter, or is that
No, that's the amount you could put into a 401k
okay?
as of 2025. We're talking about 2026. You could put in 24,500. If you're over 50 years old, you could put an additional 8,000 on top of that, so that's 32,500. And just to make sure that things are adequately complicated, because that's the way the system is, if you're between the ages of 60 to 63, in lieu of the $8,000, you could put in 11,500. I believe that's the correct number. So it's 24,500 plus 11,500, which gets you to about $36,000.
So $36,000 goes into the 401k vehicle.
Correct. If you're over 50, that's the amount you could put in as the employee.
When you say retirement account, and we've covered this in other episodes, what else could it be referring to?
Well, retirement account could be referred to a whole host of different types of retirement accounts. So the way the system works in the United States is the type of retirement account you'll have access to is very much tied to how you're employed. It sounds bizarre, but just the way the system works. So just in terms of illustration, if you work for a nonprofit, you may have access to a 403b, which has the same contribution rules, or 401k. If you have a for profit business, you'll have access to a 401k or a SEP IRA account. If it's a smaller company, maybe a simple 401k is the most popular. For many people who work for the government or work for a hospital, they may have access to something called a 457 plan, and there are different types of 457 plans. The important thing for people to understand is to survey what is available to you based on your employment. Anyone could contribute to an individual retirement account or an IRA, but there are income limitations that may restrict how much you can contribute or the tax benefits that you'll get from an account like that. So I always tell my clients, what do you have access through your employer where you could put in a lot more money and they don't have income restrictions in terms of what you could put in?
How should someone listening know how much they can allocate towards retirement?
There are rules of thumb, and I think it's situation specific. I think if you stick with the guidelines of how much you're allowed to contribute to these accounts, that's a great starting point. So last year it was 23.5. If you're putting in $23,500 a year and your spouse is doing the same thing, you'll probably be in pretty good shape. And that's not assuming that your company doesn't give a match, which many companies do give a match. So that'd be money on top of that. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're doing that every single year, you and your spouse are putting in the max that you can every year, you're in very, very good shape. You may have a high burn rate where you spend a lot of money, but if you're at least doing that for a 30 to 40-year time frame, you're going to have a very, very significant portfolio, assuming that money's invested correctly. There are other rules of thumb where people will say, oh, save 15% or save 20%. Some people are starting later in life, some people are starting earlier, and that may adjust it. But those are just some guidelines that you could consider.
What if someone listening to this doesn't have 23,000, but where they're holding in life, they have a total of $3,200 to put in their 401k IRA? What's your message to them?
Start somewhere. I mean, not everyone starts their career making $500,000 a year and could contribute, or $1 million a year, and they could save into all these fancy different types of accounts. Like most people are starting from some more modest means and they contribute what they can. I think that brings up a very important point, which is the habit of getting into savings. You should be saving every year. Not everyone's going to start with maxing out the retirement account, but if you make it your mission to save 10% a year or 15 or 20% a year, that's a very, very good habit to have for the next 40 years, and you'll be very successful.
Who would you rather be, the 45-year-old that starts at the age of 45 putting away $24,000 a year? Or would you rather be the 25-year-old putting away $4,000 or $5,000 a year at the age of 25?
I mean, the way the numbers typically work, and in this example, I don't work the numbers, but the biggest asset that people have is time on their side. The most important factor in investing is how much time you have to invest. I think I started the podcast when I was on last time talking about how time horizon is the key to investing. People with a long time horizon have the biggest asset on their side. So you want to be that young person who's starting to save early. When you wake up at 45 and just start saving, you're missing out on 2 decades of compound interest, which could be very harmful.
If you are 45, you should still start. But if I can scream anything from the rooftops to the people that are in their 20s, realize that time is such a powerful commodity that people in their 40s wish they had, not just because it's longer life,
Mm.
but because that power of compounding, even at a smaller amount,
Yeah.
is phenomenal.
Yeah, power of compounding that, if you may not be able to save in the future given what's going on with your family, with life, financially. So just being able to start early is very, very important. And, I remember just from personally, when I started in the business, even though I wasn't making a lot of money, I had very few obligations. I had 9 roommates living in a dilapidated townhouse in Washington Heights. People may think I lived like a yeshiva buck or an animal, but it was just I didn't have that many expenses. My rent was $300, I think, a month, or $350. So the ability to be able to put away money before I had kids, before I had responsibilities and a mortgage and other payments, it was just much easier back then, even though I was making lot less money.
Starting the year, let's walk through it step by step. You want to make sure that you're thinking about the entire year from day one or even before day one, right? I've seen Elliot Pepper out in Baltimore by 11:30 a.m. He's maxed out his IRA or whatever his retirement vehicles are in that He's very intentional about it. Would you recommend, and as much work as it is, or having the guts to sit down and face the numbers, would you recommend to people to look at the year as a whole and create some sort of game plan?
I think that's worthwhile. I think that practically it's very difficult to do because you don't know what's going to come up. At the very least, you could set up a system, and this is what I do, where you're saving for your financial future, and then, which is what I do for my retirement accounts, and then have a system to add money to your other accounts for your other goals on a regular basis. I don't know what expenses are going to come up throughout the year. I have an idea and a game plan, and some people do need to work through the numbers. At the very least, and I think for most people, the most practical approach is just make sure you're paying yourself first to start the year, and then as other things come up, you could deal with them as they come up.
What does paying yourself first mean practically?
It means I take money from my checking account and put it into my Roth 401k, which is what I personally use right after I get the money.
So your future self, right?
Yes.
It's not paying yourself and buying a car,
Yeah.
right? You mean it thinking about the future.
It's paying retired Jonathan Shenkman first.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good.
That's one goal. I have three others, which we could discuss later, but that's the primary goal for my retired Jonathan Shenkman.
Interesting. I'd imagine most people could do a pretty good job guesstimating what their expenses are going to be. Now, there are always curveballs and hopefully good curveballs, but if someone were to look at the last 5 years, the average person probably within $20,000 could guesstimate what it would be, no?
Yeah. One thing that I do to that point is I'll look at my income and expenses from last year, and that's how I'll adjust how much I save into my other accounts because that there's no hard limit. Like when I save to a taxable account or to an UGMA account, just as an example, there's no limit to like 23,500 per year. You could put in whatever you want into those
Mhm.
accounts. So if I look at my income and expenses last year, assuming the same thing, I could make the adjustments on how much I want to be added to those accounts on a monthly basis so I won't dig myself into a hole. And then at the end of the year, I can make different adjustments if I want to add more money or not.
Let's say someone's listening. It's the first ever, not just Kosher Money episode, not just Jonathan Shenkman episode, which you do have your own podcast, but they've never listened to any financial advice. They've heard you. And for the next 30 years, on January 1st, they move $24,000 a year into a retirement account and let it sit there. It's beautiful cash, crisp dollar bills sitting in a bank. What's your message to them as they turn 70?
That's a pretty bad decision to do that. You really set me up for that one. But
Why? They did everything you just said.
they did. They have to invest the money the right way.
What does that mean?
A big mistake that some people make, and I'm always blown away when I see this, but I probably shouldn't be surprised, is people think that just saving is enough. You can't just save the money. It has to be invested the right way because inflation will eat away at your buying power. If you have money sitting in cash and you fast forward all those years, you'll have a large sum of cash sitting there. But in terms of buying power, it's not going to be as worth as much as it was when you first put it in because everything costs more money. Eggs, computers, healthcare, everything's going to cost more money. It needs to be invested in such a way where it's outpacing the growth of inflation. And the way to do that is by investing in the market, mostly the stock market, to be some other things as well, but it's mostly has to be in stock market, which historically has outpaced inflation. So yes, it must be invested appropriately. And what I'm always blown away by is when people have a 401k, they're very proud that they're contributing there. And I look at it, I'm like, you're sitting in a short-term bond fund or you're sitting in a money market fund for years. Like, is that a bad thing? Yeah, that's a pretty bad thing because you missed out on the past 10 years of growth in the market. Yeah, you have to make sure it's invested the right way also. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It could be a simple, move it to a target date fund, move it to a couple equity funds. That's much, much better situation than just sitting in cash.
Still better than having spent it on something foolish,
Yes,
right?
instead of blowing it on something nonsensical. Yeah.
Right, right. So what accounts do you personally use to invest?
So the first thing I use, and I kept mentioning retirement account, is I use a Roth 401k. So the way it works is there's a traditional versus a Roth option. Traditional is you put in the money pre-tax, a gross tax deferred. When you take out the money, and you pay tax on it. What I prefer to use is I use a Roth account where you put in the money post-tax, a gross tax deferred, and then whenever you decide to take out the money, you don't pay tax on the money. So you're not sharing that pool of assets with the IRS. With the traditional, you look at it as like a portion of this money is being shared with the IRS because you do need to pay tax on it. I'm a huge fan of the Roth option. I think people get very caught up on when they should be taxed, trying to project out what tax rate they're going to be at. But you know what? There's a myriad of different variables associated with your tax rate. Is Congress going to change the tax rate? Where you're going to live? Your income situation? Maybe something that you don't foresee in the future. The key is that you're saving. Roth makes a lot more sense to me because the money could grow and then that money's mine. I don't have to split it with the IRS. And you also don't have to take out the money because there aren't required minimum distributions like there are with a traditional type of account. So I do a Roth option. That's for retirement. And then I have other goals that I save for. One is a taxable account, and then I have a UGMA or UPMA account, different name depending what state you're on, both the same thing. And then I have a New York State 529 account, and I could go through each of those if you'd like.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through everything. Okay, so you have a Roth 401k. Can someone open that up for themselves and their wife? I know you mentioned before. Does that mean $48,000 a year, $46,000 a year, each of us can, or total, we can put away towards retirement?
So 401k is tied to your business. So if you have your own business or you work as part of a business, you may be able to contribute to a 401k or a Roth 401k. Not every company has a Roth option. At this stage where we are, most companies will have both a traditional option and a Roth option. If you work at a business or you have your own business, you could participate in a 401k plan. My wife does not have her own business. I do. She has a Roth 401k at her business.
At her business.
Yeah.
So she can do 24k roughly, and you
Correct.
can do 24?
Correct. Yes. And she gets a match on top of that.
Oh, everyone should be
Yeah.
taking advantage of that.
If you have a match, that's free money. It's be silly not to. I mean, many companies offer a match in their plan, and you should 100% participate. It's free money to be able to participate in that.
Even if someone theoretically may need the money now.
I mean, listen, everyone has to look at what their expenses are. Obviously, you need the money to pay Yeshiva tuition, then you can't put it into the retirement account or participate in the plan. But see what's offered to you, and then you kind of do your own analysis in terms of trade offs. But to leave money on the table that your company will give to you, that seems very short sighted.
What platform do you use when you're investing personally?
Personally, the way it works, because I manage money for a living, is all my assets are held at Fidelity. It's actually called NFS, National Financial Services, which is the Fidelity Institutional. For people that have money management business, it's called NFS, but it's part of Fidelity.
I have an account in Fidelity, and for the sake of a podcast we did, I opened up some UTMAs, UGMAs, whatever they were, in Schwab, and Fidelity's user interface was so much easier.
Yeah. You gotta see what works for you. Every company has their own interface. They change over time because every now and then a company will put a lot of money into their interface. I'm not an expert in that. You just have to figure out what works best for you. And whatever gets you to keep saving and keeps you on the right path is good. If it's an interface, and there's some interfaces now that encourage you to trade a lot and make bad financial decisions, even though it looks pretty, you should avoid that. I'm not naming names, but I think many people listening to this could figure it out. You shouldn't be encouraged to trade more or check your investments all the time. You just want something that has functionality and you could do what you need to do.
Right. Mobile notifications are not necessary when saving for retirement. If it's a fraud alert, set up a text message, but more than that, go easy.
Correct. Yeah.
You mentioned taxable investing account.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's just a account I use to invest for other goals. As most people know, there are restrictions in terms of when you could take the money out of a retirement account. Typically, you can't take the money out until you're 59 and a half. But many people have goals that are before age 59 and a half. They have a bar bat mitzvah, a wedding. They need to do an extension on their house, redo their kitchen, buy a new car, etc. Those are monies that you don't want locked up in a retirement account. So I have another account that I invest where I could get access to the money all the time without any subject to penalties. And it's money that I don't want earmarked for retirement. I want it to be able to live my life and enhance my life now. So that's just a regular account. I invest it according to my needs, and I could put in as much money as I want. There are no restrictions, no income restrictions, and I could pull it out whenever I need it.
If you needed that money for a bar mitzvah you're making in 3 months, would you invest that or just put that into a high yield savings
So I'll put
account?
it in a high yield savings or a money market account. That's not money you want risked in the fluctuations of the market. Like I said, I think the time horizon is a very big focus on where you want to put your money. If it's for the long term for retirement, use a retirement account, get the tax benefits. If it's money that you need sooner, but not 3 months down the road, you may want to still invest in the market because, if it's money that I'm not spending for 8 years for the next simcha, then you want to invest it to have it grow. But if it's money you need, like you said, in 3 months, that may be needed to pay for an upcoming simcha or put a new roof on your house, you're not risking that money. Just put it in a money market account or savings account and move on.
We'll be right back to our episode. But one of the toughest parts of being an entrepreneur is that of feeling completely overwhelmed. You know what I'm talking about. I hear it from people all the time. You have this great idea, this spark, you're running a business, but now you're just stuck. You're going through the motions. You feel like there's a bottleneck in your own company. You want to delegate, but you can't. Your team isn't really on the same page. Again, you're going through this motion and you're having business stress. You're taking it home with you. Sheesh. Don't juggle everything. If you're a business that's looking to grow, start a business, we know you have kids, harnasa, tuition, your calendar's a war zone. So much I can tell you that can resonate with you. I know where you're holding. I was one of those business owners, but I want to tell you about a very impressive individual, Sruli Schoenfeld. He calls himself the business organizer, but honestly, that doesn't even begin to cover it. Sruli is like a business therapist. He has an operations background and he fixes things. He doesn't just come in, say, okay, use this software, get rid of that, make a to do list. He's going to sit with you. He's going to help figure out why you're stuck, why you can't let go emotionally of that one task. Why are you micromanaging a specific part of your business? He's going to help clear those emotional blocks and help you build practical systems, define roles within the company, and get your entire team aligned. One page, okay? There are real people in our community, whether it's in distribution, logistics, high end home services. They were drowning, whether it was high overhead, stuck in old processes. He went into their businesses and he helped them. He helped them restructure their teams, streamline workflows, and it frees them up to focus on the work or their life. And you know what happens? It grew the business. So he's not going to be a coach that's yelling at you from the sidelines. If that's what you need, maybe he has a recommendation. He's more of a thinking partner, an accountability partner, and he's going to walk the path with you for your business. And here's what I really love about Srili. He's not going to lock you into some crazy long-term contract. It's simple. You only book a session, and if you want another session, he'll deliver. And that's it. He has confidence. He doesn't need to lock you in, okay? I do this similar at my marketing agency. I don't have long-term contracts. You can check us out, by the way. If a client has good feelings about the vendor, they're going to continue using them. So if you provide a good service like Srili does, he's going to be there for you and you're going to want him to be there for you. So after your session, you're going to get a written breakdown of exactly what to fix and how to fix it. So if you're feeling trapped in the business you've built and what you really want is just relief, look him up. Do yourself a favor. Reach out to Srili Schoenfeld. Give him a call at 347-939-9959. That's 347-939-9959. You can even send him a WhatsApp, shoot him an email, info@srilischoenfeld.com. Check his website out, srilischoenfeld.com. You could see what he's all about. He's very enjoyable to talk to. Tell him you heard him on Kosher Money. Seriously, make the call. You deserve it. Send the message. All the links are in the show notes. No reason you can't be flourishing in your day-to-day while your business does its thing. Cha-ching. I want to take a minute to tell you about Twillory. If you are in the market for new men's clothing that feel good, look good, and actually last, you need to visit the following URL. Ready? Twillory.com/koshermoney. If you're listening right when this episode drops, you're in luck. Go take advantage of their end of year sales. It's going on right now. It's their biggest sale of the year, and you get the best part. What is it? You don't need a code, right? No more promo code. They're just giving it to everyone. If you're listening to this months or even years later, fantastic episode, right? Don't worry. Twillory is always dishing out comfortable deals. So whether it's long and short sleeve shirts, shirts that breathe, suits that stretch, designed with you in mind, Twillory has it all. Head over to twillory.com/koshermoney. Upgrade your look today. Remember, if you're not in the market for new clothing, don't buy it. But if you are and you want clothing that feel good, legit, feel good, it's like it's giving you a hug, that's Twillory. So stop compromising on comfort and durability. The things you might be buying aren't lasting, so you're just spending more and more money. Take it from me, twillory.com/koshermoney. How do you move money into your brokerage account, this taxable investing account, is that automated in some fashion, a hybrid, some automated, some in real time?
So I set up every year where money goes in every month into my taxable account. From my checking account to my taxable account, it's invested automatically and I don't per my allocation that I decide. There's nothing to think about. I don't even remember that it's going in. It just goes in. And sometimes when I'm looking through my transactions, I say, "Oh, I contributed to the account." But there's nothing to think about. It goes in automatically, so it takes the emotion out of it. And I would encourage everyone to remove the emotion from the process and add money to their taxable account. Now, what happens at the end of the year, if we are fortunate to have a good year, let's say my wife gets a bonus, business is good for me, the market goes up, and I have more money that I don't need for expenses, then we may put in a lump sum manually into that account. But we reassess that towards year end to see if it makes sense.
Got it. Is your wife involved in the decision making in terms of accounts, assets, or does she leave that up to you?
That's a great question, and I feel like the distribution of jobs in our house financially just kind of fell naturally to what we both want to focus on. So, personal finance wise, I handle the investments. We discuss if we have extra cash, like what we should do with it. When it comes to giving and philanthropy and charitable giving, we both have discussion on that. But she is certainly much more on top of where we give and when we give than I am. I think the key is really just communication. I think we're very much on the same page about money, but certain times throughout the year, different things come up where we need to have a discussion about it. And, we discuss it and see what makes sense and come to some joint conclusion. She has no interest in the investment aspects. We talk once a year about investments and it involves around her 401k and if her allocation still makes sense. Beyond that, she's not interested in that part of the process.
To be honest, that money relationship sounds somewhat dreamy.
It's helpful to marry somebody who's on the same page with you financially. I'm not a relationship expert, but I think it's probably studies that you could point to this after the show, where one of the biggest drivers of divorce is people that are not on the same page financially. I mean, I see it with people I work with. For the most part, people are on the same page and they come to me and they're all on board to do things. But then you'll get people, and one person is a huge spender on nonsense or maybe not nonsense things that they just think are important in their life. The other person's a big saver and it could really drive a wedge between them, and it's very important to get on the same page. No one is ever going to see eye to eye on everything. I mean, whenever you're interacting with any individual, it could be a spouse, a coworker, a friend, there's always going to be differences opinions. That's what makes life interesting, but there needs to be some general themes that you agree on, otherwise it's going to be very difficult in your relationship.
I've heard from a couple people recently how they're nervous to meet with someone like a Jonathan Shenkman or a budgeter of some sort because for so many years, sometimes decades, their spouses have been programmed or programmed themselves to live in such a way that, what do you mean? You're questioning my spending? You don't trust me? You've never questioned it before. And they're like, no, I just want to get a little bit more serious. And overcoming that is so difficult that they'd rather just ignore it and, deal with the frustration whenever it does pop up.
And whenever meeting with somebody, it's very much not judgmental. It's meeting people where they are. And everyone's coming from a different situation. Like in the purpose of meeting with someone like me is they want to get things in order. And it's not about shaming people. It's about meeting them where they are. So there could be two different spouses with two different points of view on something. And you just have to figure out a solution tailored to this particular client. I think if people go in to a meeting with a financial advisor and they know it's not going to be judgmental, it's about figuring out a plan that best suits their family, then they'll be less hesitant about meeting with somebody.
You mentioned the UTMA, UGMA, UTMA, UGMA. What are those briefly? And what does Jonathan Shankman do with them in his personal life?
So UTMA and UGMA are both accounts to benefit a child. And it becomes their child's money and their control over the money when they become the age of majority. It's always their money, but they control it once they become age of majority. New York, I think it's age 21, and you could put in money to invest for them. The way I look at it also is a way to kind of a bucket to have all my kids' money that they've accumulated until they become of age. So bar bat mitzvah money, birthday money, Hanukkah, they get a Hanukkah present. They do some type of babysitting and they want to put the money in there, and then it's invested. And I contribute to it on a monthly basis, a modest amount of money money, nothing crazy, but it's not one of the higher priorities. And this way, at the end, when they finish college or when they enter the workforce, they'll have money to start their life with, start a business, buy a down payment on a house, just a cushion to be able to start their life with. That's my view on that money.
You're automating that,
Yes, I automate that also, and it's a modest sum of money. It's not crazy.
and it's also invested. It's not just sitting in cash.
Correct. It's an investive fairly aggressively because they have a longer time horizon.
And there's some tax benefit of doing that,
There's no
right?
tax benefit for that. That's a good question. Many people think there's a tax benefit. There is no tax benefit for the UGMA account.
Oh, UGMA. What's the $1,350 of some sort in the beginning? It's taxed on the child's
Something
rate.
called the kitty tax, and that
Yeah.
amount changes. I don't remember what the number
Uh-huh.
is as of 2026, but it's not so much as a big tax benefit as it is a little bit of a tax loophole where the money's taxed at the parent's rate once they have a certain level of
Mhm.
income. That's just a nuance of the account.
So I set this up probably in the last few months for a few of my kids. One of them, my oldest, I set it up maybe a year or two ago. And I've been putting in not crazy amounts, but just automated. I was looking at my children's UTMA accounts and it legitimately grows. Now, the market has done quite well in 2025. And if you look back at our conversation a year ago, we didn't know and we don't know what's going to happen in 2026. But it's just cool to see that the growth happens whether you're realizing or not. And it's automated. And the way I'm using it is, and you'll tell me if I'm using it incorrectly, I'm putting money away for bar mitzvahs and weddings, right? I don't want to look back in 20 years and say, hey, I didn't put money away. Now, someone else said to me, and Mendy Pfefferkorn has a thought on this. He was a fantastic fellow that we had on a few months ago. He says, just realize the money after the children turn a certain age, maybe it's 21, the money belongs to them. So you guys better be on the same page. And I said to myself, Leah and Hara, God willing, we are. But would you, if you were saving for a money, put it into UTMA for a wedding?
I would not. I Because that's really the kids' money, and there's some restrictions in terms of are you using for your benefit or for the child's benefit. One client that I have does this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Is he has accounts for each of his kids. They're all set up in his own name. They're all his money, but he kind of put a nickname on the account for each of the children. And he told me, I actually didn't ask him what the purpose of the account was, and he actually told me recently. Each one is to pay for their respective bar or bat mitzvah. You do the same thing for a wedding and add to it on a regular basis. But this is why you always control the money on the account. With an UGMA or UTMA account, there could be issues if it's not used for the child's benefit. So for the situation you're describing, I would encourage you to put in open separate accounts with the kid's nickname on it, but that is owned by you, and then the money could grow, and you control those funds to use how you want.
That's a brokerage account
That's a
you're
regular
describing?
brokerage, a taxable investment account. Yeah.
But Jonathan, slow your roll. This wedding is legitimately for the benefit of the child. The child, I don't have to make the kid's wedding. You, child, make the wedding. Oh, you need money? Look at this. There's a UTMA account with $25,000 in it.
Yeah. That's a wonderful conversation you could have for your kid, or maybe try to convince the IRS or whatever
Yeah.
it may be.
Okay.
I understand what you're getting at. If you want more flexibility and more control than just opening a regular investment account in your name may be helpful.
Okay, cool. So for those listening, that doesn't mean that everything I did until now is a waste. That can still legitimately grow in a UTMA account. But to Jonathan's point, create some brokerage accounts, nickname them, which is very easy in Fidelity or Schwab or wherever. And then you'll know exactly what the money's
The other
earmarked
thing you
for.
have to be mindful about, and one of the trade-offs, there's always trade-offs in personal finance, but one of the trade-offs with an UTMA account is it becomes the child's money after a certain point. So let's say your kid gets married at age 23, and you say to him, you want a fancy wedding, you have all this money in the UTMA account, and they say, well, at 22, I took that money out and bought a Lamborghini.
Mhm.
It was their money. They could do what they want, and then they're not going to have the nice wedding that you envisioned because they spent it how they pleased before the wedding.
That does make sense. Okay, so it's January 1st, 2026. Jonathan sits down at his Fidelity account, looks at his Roth IRA. He's keeping the same, not doing anything crazy. I said Roth IRA, I meant the Roth 401k. By the way, do you have any IRA
Yes,
accounts?
from previous employers, I rolled it over into a Roth IRA. And before I started working full time, I had a Roth IRA. My father made me set up a Roth IRA when I was 16. So,
Some people that are listening have IRAs from employers 18 years ago and
yeah.
they've never touched. What's your recommendation to them?
Well, my recommendations, first of all, I mean, it may make sense to roll it over into an IRA. This way, it's all organized in one place, and then you have to make sure that it's invested the right way. Per the point we discussed before, if you have all these accounts and they're not invested the right way, they're in cash, they're too risky, they're not risky enough, then it's not going to be able to grow to achieve your goals. So definitely look at it, consolidate it, so it's easier to track and manage.
Someone over the course of 30 years could have IRAs in so many different platforms. Would you recommend saying, I'm going to sit down with somebody if I don't know what to do and just move everything into a single platform?
I think that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Much of what I see for people that are older and are planning for retirement, the biggest obstacle we need to overcome is having what you just described: accounts at a million different places, a million different firms, many different types of accounts that are replicas of each other. But you have one at Schwab, one at Fidelity, one at Interactive Brokers, and one at Morgan Stanley. Why do you have all these accounts? And then they have a bunch of stock certificates for the older clients who knows what they are. And then they have old 401ks. I remember one time I had a guy, I don't know if I told this story last time when I was on the podcast. It was like one of these situations where he had 25 different accounts at like 18 different institutions. We brought it all together. It was a few $1 million, all great. He calls me one time and he said, "What happened to my IBM stock?" I think that's what it was. And I said, "You don't have any IBM stock." And he was hard of hearing and I'm like yelling and everyone's looking at me. "You have no IBM stock. Where's my IBM stock?" He realized what I was saying. He ended up sending a few weeks later the IBM stock. It was a $500,000 of IBM stock that he found, or his daughter found, in his basement. That's what happens when you have stuff all over the place. He
And,
found a $500,000 of
and, the,
IBM stock.
and the only proof of that is a paper in his basement?
Yeah, this is old school. I'm hoping most people listening to this, all their stuff is digital and online, and they're getting statements. But people used to buy stock and get whatever stock certificate. And this was an older gentleman, and he found about a $500,000 of in IBM stock that was sitting in his basement. And I had no idea of knowing what it is. His kids didn't know about it. Like me or you would take our winter coat and find an extra $5 bill
Right.
in our pocket, and we're excited. He just found this in his basement. So.
I'm scared to think of people cleaning out a parent's basement, assuming all the papers are garbage when there's legitimate money sitting in a filing cabinet.
Yeah, it's very easy. I mean, it's a little bit cumbersome at the beginning, but it's very easy to consolidate and make sense of your assets. It's a little work up front. You need to work with somebody. But once it's done, your life on the financial side should be so much easier to manage. The money will be invested the right way. If God forbid something happens, you'll have people that your kids could swoop in and take control of everything. So it's no longer a stress in your life. There's plenty of things to stress over. Your finances should not be one of them if they're handled the right way and everything's organized appropriately.
Do you find, and we spoke about this on another episode or two, but you'll sit down with someone passes away, and their children assume that everything comes to them, but the documentation, the wills, the trusts, everything wasn't set up correctly. And it's not as simple as saying, "Hey, I'm their child. I should have access to this." And everyone says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." The court says, "Slow your roll."
Well, that's more of a role of an estate planning attorney. Hopefully, by the time they come to me or while I'm working with them, that all that is figured out, and I point them to competent attorneys to be able to work that out. One issue that has come up, it hasn't come up with me personally, but just it has happened in the past, and I've heard plenty of horror stories about this, is folks won't update their beneficiaries on their IRA accounts. So if you have an ex-spouse on your IRA account and then you married to someone else for 25 years, but your sole beneficiary is your ex-spouse, all the money's going to the ex-spouse and there's nothing you could do about it. So make sure you do an annual review where you make sure the beneficiaries make sense. Take 2 seconds. Look, who are the beneficiaries? Yes, this still makes sense, and then move on with life. The last thing you need is all your money that you spent a lifetime accumulating going to the wrong person just because you didn't take literally a minute to find out who the beneficiaries were.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Could we make a one pager? Let's say this episode airs in 4 to 6 weeks. Can we make a one pager that we can put in the show notes for people who do want to get serious about 2026 with just a checklist? And beneficiaries is super important.
Sure.
You really have to remember, but here are 10, 20 things that you should think about as you're thinking about money.
20 is a lot. Let's stick to probably like 10 or something.
Yeah.
I'm saying people get overwhelmed. If you have a
Mhm.
list of 20 things, people are going to space out after the second one and say it's too overwhelming. I would encourage people to focus on a few key points and then they could grow from there.
Let's do that. 20 items is available for premium subscribers
Yeah, exactly.
only. So, Jonathan, what are you investing in 2026?
So, the first thing I'll say about investing is that I always pursue a philosophy of diversification. I know people may be listening to this and are rolling their eyes, especially given that some areas of the market have trounced others over the past 15, 20 years. but it is extremely important to make sure that you spread your asset across various different parts of the market. And I've learned this through personal experience. When I first started my career, I was at Merrill Lynch 2007. And for those who don't know, or maybe too young to remember this, that was the start of the great financial crisis. And at the time, I didn't have any clients. I was servicing the firm clients, and people would call up nervous and a panic, just a wreck, and asking me, this 22-year-old guy fresh out of college, well, what do I do? I was about to retire. All my money was in my company stock, or all my money was in the S&P 500, which plunged 60%. One guy called me, and I remember his 401k was 80% in financials during the financial crisis. He got wiped out by 80%. He spent 40 or 30 years accumulating a substantial level of assets, and now he has to put his entire retirement and life on hold and continue working for probably a decade more than he wanted to because he concentrated his investments in just one area. Nobody knows what the future holds. Nobody could predict the cycles. Please pursue a philosophy of diversification. That being said, there are a bunch of different areas that I'll put my money into. One of them is US large cap stocks. So think about the Alphabets of the world, Amazon, Meta. When you think about U.S. large cap stocks, it's usually companies with $10 billion of value and higher. So they're large companies. Then there's mega cap stocks, which are $200 billion and higher. And I should have said this before I jumped into this. The way I get my exposure to different investments is exclusively through ETFs and mutual funds.
You're not investing in the
I do
individual
not
stock.
invest in individual stocks. I don't give recommendations for individual stocks. There's no need to invest in individual stocks. It is basically gambling. Nobody knows what's going to perform when. And Boeing's a perfect example. I think I used this example on the previous podcast. Boeing is a massive company. They basically have no competition in the U.S. And from one minute to the next, the planes started falling out of the sky. The dividends went to zero, and the stock price was cut in half. That could happen with any company anywhere, no matter how successful, no matter how deep their moat is, no matter their competitive advantage, and no matter how important they are to the economy. Any company could go through a nosedive. Stick to ETFs and mutual funds, where if one company goes belly up, it's not going to put you in financial ruins.
I'm looking at Boeing stock. It's down 4% today.
It has since bounced back nicely, but there's a number of years
Yeah.
where it got hammered, and people were relying on the dividend. Imagine if Boeing ended up 20% of your portfolio. It's a
Yeah.
blue chip company. People
Right.
thought nothing could happen. Then you can't rely on that dividend anymore and you're retired. It's devastating.
Wild. Even if someone was to come to you and say, hey, NVIDIA stock, take a look over the last 5 years. You don't even know what NVIDIA does, but it's going up. Get in. You're still on the ground floor. Bitcoin, whatever it is. What do you say to somebody that does pull you over in shul and say,
It's always insured, by the way.
yeah, take a look at this company. I'm not telling you to put 20% of your money into it, but put 5% of your money into an individual stock.
It's human nature to want to speculate and to want to scratch that itch of being able to dabble in individual securities or to take a little bit of risk. And I don't restrict people from doing that. I say take 5% or less of your investable assets, open up what I call a cowboy account, and do whatever you want with it. If it grows to more than 5%, take some money off the table, figure everything worked out, and move it into your serious money account with me. If it plummets, it doesn't make any difference. It's not going to derail your finances. The key is putting guardrails on people's on people's speculation. This way, it doesn't impact their financial life too negatively. But if things do work out, they satisfy that itch of participating in a winning stock.
Before we get into other areas that you're going to invest in the market in 2026, you mentioned the US large cap stocks. I want to go back. When someone transfers an IRA into a Roth IRA or from one platform to the other, sometimes there are fees. I saw somewhere that you can sometimes ask the receiving platform to waive some level of fees. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's transferring from one institution to another, figure an IRA to an IRA, this is a little bit different than a 401k to an IRA. The institution that the money's being moved from will probably charge you a fee. When I started my own firm, I reimbursed all the transfer fees for my clients. It's a advisor by advisor decision if they want to do that. In the scheme of things, if you're working with people that are relatively high net worth to pay however much money, 75, $150 to move an account. No, it's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So it was an issue. I didn't even discuss it with most clients. I just reimbursed them and moved on with life. And when you work with hundreds of different accounts, it could be a sizable sum of money, But for me, it was the right thing to do. I was starting a business, and I figure why should they pay to move their account? So I reimbursed everyone.
Are those change fees from the platforms based on percentage or a
No,
flat fee?
dollar. It's a dollar fee.
Dollar.
Yeah.
Okay. But it can't hurt to ask the platform to say, hey, can you waive this?
Well, I would ask the person who you're well, if you're working with advisor, I would ask
Right.
them to reimburse you. And if you're working by yourself, then you maybe would ask them. I don't know if they'll help you or not, but you could ask them.
Okay. We're going to talk about other areas Jonathan is investing in. We mentioned the US large cap stocks. This is not advice and recommendations. This is what he is doing. What else are you doing?
So other areas that I get exposure to through mutual funds or ETFs is U.S. small stocks and medium-sized stocks. So that's companies that are figured from $300 million to $2 billion for small and $2 to $10 billion for medium-sized companies. And the reason I'm getting exposure to these areas of the market is because when large cap which many people focus on because that's primarily the S&P 500. When that goes up, small cap may go down, and vice versa. When large cap does no longer has a run and goes down, then small cap may go up. Historically, over the long term, small and medium cap, there's been a little bit of a higher return for those areas of the market. Will that continue in the future? I don't know. It hasn't been true the past 15 plus years. But like I said, areas of the market move in cycles, and that's why I want exposure to them. During the 70s and 80s and the 90s, small and medium cap actually outpaced the large cap. So it's worth having exposure to small and medium sized companies. But it doesn't always have to be about size. I also have exposure to other parts of the world. So as an example, I have exposure to developed and emerging markets, and they have been terrible for the past basically 15 years plus compared to the S&P 500. But this year, they're trouncing the S&P 500. I don't know if it'll continue, but the S&P 500, as of this recording, is up something like 16%, which is phenomenal. But developed markets are up about 26%. 25, 26%, which is great. So it's always very important to have exposure to different areas of the US market, different parts of the world. This way, when one area zigs, the other one will zag and hopefully mitigate your risk.
It's funny you mentioned that. Part of my portfolio does have this international allocation. And the last few years, I said, why don't I just sell this? It's not doing much. But I just left it because I hear from people like you to diversify, and that is some level of diversification.
Diversification, to that point, always means apologizing for something because it means you're never going to have the highest return and you're never going to have the lowest return because you have a bunch of different asset classes. So it's very important to make sure you have all these areas in your portfolio. This way, you're mitigating how much money you'll lose in a down market. And also, when things do well, you're going to participate in that upside. But there's always going to be some laggard in your portfolio, and that's normal, and you shouldn't get worked up about that.
Artificial intelligence is everywhere, powering mind blowing tools, smart systems, and yes, plenty of hype. But here's the real question: how can AI actually help your business? How are your competitors already using it to build smarter apps and streamline operations? That's where Bitbean steps in. They take your big ideas and bring them to life, using the latest AI advancements to make custom software more powerful and more affordable. So, whether you need an app, a robust backend system, or a full scale digital solution, Bitbean can design it, build it, and help it grow. So visit bitbean.com to start the conversation and tell them Ellie from Kosher Money sent you. You'll get premium software without the premium price tag. The link's in the show notes, QR code on the screen. You know what to do. Did you know that because of Kol Chabad, over 47,000 families in Israel have reliable access to nutritious food? Yes, it's true. That's hundreds of thousands of people being helped because of people like you. Parents shouldn't have to skip meals so their children can maybe eat. And Kol Chabad is on the front lines. They've been around since 1788. It's crazy, right? The percentage of every dollar donated that actually goes to help the poor and sick is very high. Why? Because Kol Chabad keeps administrative costs to a minimum. They try to avoid high rents and have an army of volunteers, great people across the world, actually. But they can't do this alone. So give what you can to our brothers and sisters in need. Go to kolchabad.org/koshermoney and give what you can. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Links in the show notes. And now back to the episode. You didn't mention sectors. You just said size of companies and those stocks associated with it. Was that intentional?
Yes, it's intentional. The only sector that I carve out a portion of my portfolio to invest in is real estate because it's such a large part of the overall economy.
Mhm.
Everything else, I'm concerned that you could have many years where they'll just have horrific performance. We saw this in energy where it was down and did nothing for 10, 15 years. The most prominent example is tech stocks, which are obviously the darling of every investor right now. But people seem to forget that during the dot-com bubble, which was an extreme example, but it did happen, the market plummeted, the tech sector, by 80%. Imagine putting all your money into the tech sector, which a lot of people are doing right now, and then it plummets 80% in dollar terms. You work your life to save $1 million. Then you want to retire. Then the market drops by $800,000. Your portfolio drops by $800,000, and you only have $200,000 to live your life on. It's pretty tough pill to swallow, and it's going to really derail your retirement plans. So it's very important that I diversify beyond the sector. So when I'm talking about small companies and medium companies and large companies, all these styles have exposure to all different sectors: technology, healthcare, real estate, etc. I don't have to worry about singling out one area of the market and it plummeting.
I have a question, and this could be foolish, but isn't the S&P 100 or 500 from a percentage standpoint overly saturated in 2025 with tech
It
stocks?
is. Well, that's why most of my portfolio is not in the S&P 500,
Uh-huh.
because if it does tank, which inevitably at some point it will,
Right.
I'll get hit, but it's not going to wipe me out.
But all the people say in the coffee room or in shul, just buy VOO or SPY and you're good to go.
A good rule of life in terms of investing is to avoid what people say in the kiddish club, on the golf course, or in the coffee room in terms of investing. And if you did the opposite, you'd probably be in pretty good shape.
They call it a boring index fund. What could be wrong with boring?
I think a boring index fund is extremely prudent for your portfolio, but there are many different types of index funds. So I have an index fund that has exposure to the S&P 500 or the total U.S. market. I have an index fund that has exposure to real estate, to small cap stocks, to international stocks. So I pair all these together. So if one area gets clobbered, my whole portfolio will remain intact.
You're making me nervous that I'm over exposed to tech because I've invested a good portion of my portfolio into the S&P 500.
I think many people are doing that. And I think one thing you could do, obviously, you don't want to sell everything at a high. It may make sense that if you're in a tax advantage account and just trim your position, but add new contributions to other areas of the market. Add some to small cap and international if you feel like that part of your portfolio needs to be built up a little bit. So build around that large position.
And that's briefly researching what stock tickers reflect small cap funds and medium cap
Well, you
funds.
could just start by doing a search on developed markets outside the US and see what funds pop up. This is preliminary research. You have to obviously have to do some due diligence and then see what they invest in. And I bet a lot of the names will be things that you're familiar with. Mitsubishi or Shell are companies you're familiar with, and having a little bit exposure to companies that are based outside the US that have been around for a while that are blue chip companies may be sensible.
I think anyone listening to this, the conversation has gotten to the point where, yes, opening up your own brokerage account, moving money into SPY, great, God bless. But when you're getting more nuanced than that, and based on what we're talking about, which is awesome, I really, really think that, and this is what I'm going to do, is speak to a professional so that I don't hear something on a podcast, assume I know what I'm doing, and then wake up 20 years later and I had a stock ticker off by a letter, or I smudged a number and I didn't realize I allocated way too much in a specific area.
Yeah. A few minute conversation with someone who knows what they're doing could be a game changer in your financial life. And there are many different people you could work with that have different models in terms of how they charge, in terms of how hands on they are with their approach. But just a few minute conversation could change the trajectory of your financial life. It can mitigate risk. It could position you the right way for your personal goals. The S&P 500, and this is advice I try to talk to people about all the time because it comes up often when I'm talking to people. Maybe just put all my money in the S&P 500. But everyone has different goals, different family dynamics, different time horizons, and the S&P 500 is not a solution to all of your life's problems. You need to figure out a situation that works for you. A very relevant example, especially to people that are approaching retirement. Do you really want all your money in the S&P 500? Let's say it goes down by 20% and you're withdrawing on that.
Hit them with the lost decade.
Lost decade,
Oh,
2000 and 2010.
mm.
See, Ellie follows, he's a financial
I
historian.
promise you, if you sit here, anyone sitting here for 100, this is our 102nd, 103rd episode. I promise you, you'll know just as much as me. It's not much, but you hear the same themes over and over and
Yeah.
over. I'd be remiss if I didn't
It
mention it.
doesn't even have to be a lost decade. Think about what happened in 2022, which is not too long ago. You worked your whole life, you retire, it's 2022, the market crashes by 20%. Stock market crashed by something around 20%. The bond market crashed by 18%.
Mhm.
Okay? And then you're withdrawing heavily on your portfolio because that's what you're relying on. That's a very bad situation to be in. It's called sequence of returns risk. If you start withdrawing money on a portfolio that's plummeting in value, that may shave off 10 years of money that you thought you had for the rest of your life. So instead of taking you to your 95, it takes you to your 85 because you're withdrawing heavily on your portfolio now. So someone who's approaching retirement shouldn't all be in the S&P 500. Make sure you have first of all, a cash cushion built in there to carry you for 2 or 3 years of your expenses. This way you could ride out storms. Most storms will not be longer than a couple years max. Could be longer. There
We
could be.
hope, with
We
God's
hope.
help.
We hope. That's why there are different components to your portfolio. You also may want to incorporate some Social Security claiming strategies within your portfolio, delaying Social Security so you have a higher income in retirement, which is also indexed to inflation. There are all these things you could discuss with your financial advisor beyond just throwing all your money into one ETF that may or may not solve your issues.
Which is why those target date funds, as bulky as they are, could be great for people so that when they get closer, it reallocates the money towards safer.
So I wrote an article actually, I think it was a few years ago for Forbes about target date funds. And I think they're a wonderful option in 401k plans for most participants. The problem is they're a cookie cutter model. So for someone who doesn't have the typical retirement, whether it's from, longevity purposes, they're retiring too early or too late, what they're putting their target date fund may not be the right solution for them. They may not have enough cash built in. Also, every single target date fund is invested differently depending on what the firm who's running it decides makes sense. You want to do what makes sense for you, not what makes sense for Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab, who's running the plan for you. So it's a wonderful solution for people that are in the accumulation stage of retirement within their 401k, if you have very limited selections within your 401k. But especially as you get closer to retirement, that's certainly not a one size fits all strategy.
Tell people what the lost decade was from 2000 to 2009 and give us a interesting story from those years.
Well, I mean, when people put in money in 2000 and in the S&P 500, and then uh, by the time 2009, 2010 came around, they made no money.
They lost money.
It might have been down like a 0.5%,
Oh,
whatever it was. They were basically flat. Just assume
right.
that they were flat. Now imagine, you're 55 years old and your game plan is the S&P 500 to solve all your financial issues in life, and that's where you plant your money and you're just planning on living off of that. And then you made no money. It didn't grow at all over the past 10 years. That's a pretty tough situation to be in. My career started in 2007, so my view of the world started at the great financial crisis, and that's kind of my opening story to my chapter of my career. So I don't have people that started at the dot-com bust, and the money remained flat basically until the financial crisis. But just if you have a situation like that where you make no money for a decade period of time, that's first of all, most people won't be able to stick with it. They'll end up leaving and cashing out of their portfolio at absolutely the wrong time. That happens all the time. Let's say you have the gumption to be able to stick with something and still not make any money. That puts you in a very precarious financial situation.
Gary, go on X or just Google and search the lost decade. There's so many
The
stories.
problems with people that graduated right after me. So I graduated in 2007. People that graduated, figure '08, '09, 2010,
Me.
they have no concept of risk. Some of these people, not you, you're different. You're a
No,
financial
I
historian.
mean, college, I graduated then.
Yes. So people that graduate entered the workforce in 2010. The market was hitting its low and it was just skyrocketing going forward. I mean, with some interruptions,
And gas was through the roof.
whatever gas was paying at. I mean, everything moves in cycles. But the thing is, people don't realize that the market goes down from time to time, and it can have long periods of when it really, really gets clobbered. So bringing it full circle, you always need to have exposure to different areas of the market. The name of the game with investing, people think it's a common misconception that in order to be successful with investing is you need to achieve the highest possible returns. That is wrong. You need the equivalent of singles and doubles somewhat consistently in order to achieve your goals. And you need to mitigate your financial missteps. A big part of being successful investing is minimizing your missteps. It's not getting the big grand slams. It's not finding the next Tesla. That doesn't matter. What matters is mitigating your missteps and having a process to add money to a diversified portfolio over time. You do that, you'll amass quite a bit of money, a fortune, and achieve anything you want to in life. That's for most people.
And ignore the people who consistently tell you about all the grand slams they've hit.
Correct, because they're very conveniently forgetting all the losers. I remember one time some guy came to my office. He's a nice guy, and he was going through his portfolio, and he's just like shaking his head. He's like, you know what? I see the returns are good, but whatever. But look how much better I perform than you. He takes out his phone. We're looking at the Tesla and the Nvidia and the Amazon. And I said, okay, I mean, it's all concentrated in one area of the market. We're going to talk about risk and return. And then I noticed he had a bunch of holdings that went to zero, probably 6 or 7. I was like, well, what are all the holdings that went to zero? So let's not talk about it. I want to focus on the ones I made money. I'm like, well, that's the problem. You put all this money in and you have a lot of losers. I'm looking at your portfolio. You don't have that many holdings. You have a lot of losers in there. And you're only telling me about the winners.
Survivorship bias.
Correct. Survivorship buyers. People love to share the winners, the people that have winning businesses and took a lot of risk, but no one mentions all the losers that they have.
We have about 15 minutes left. You mentioned the large cap stocks, the US small and medium sized stocks, international developed, real estate sector. What else?
I also include bonds within my portfolio. I'm still pretty aggressive in how I invest money, but just to the theme of diversification, you don't know when the whole equity market's going to take a hit, and I like to have bond exposure. Also, for most people, they don't have as much appetite for risk as they claim, meaning the market goes down and they like when it's going up, but when it crashes, they're running for the door. Bonds help you stay the course. It helps mitigate how much losses you'll have in a down market. God forbid you need the money. Bonds typically hold their own during a down market or may even move inversely to stocks, meaning they'll go up and you could take money from bonds. I think it's very important to have bonds within your portfolio. Also, during the lost decade in particular, bonds outperformed U.S. market. There are other
As did Barry bonds in that decade.
Barry bonds. Okay, yeah.
It's a little
I'm
joke.
I follow basketball.
Oh, basketball?
Yeah, I mean,
What do you
more
root for?
recent- Root for the Knicks. Go to Nets
Same.
games. Yeah. Well, last
Okay.
night was a fiasco, dude.
Oh, yeah. I can't make them out. I don't know. They're the best team in basketball one night, and then the next night, I don't know
Cat's
what they're doing.
sleeping. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Everything
think
relies on
Brunson's hurt.
Brunson. Got to move the ball.
Yeah, we should do a bonus episode just talking sports.
We could do that. I mean, I'm very limited to basketball and particularly
That's
the
okay.
Knicks, but
That's
we could,
okay.
yeah.
So those bonds performed decently during that
Yeah,
decade.
depending where you are in life, it generally makes sense to have bonds within your portfolio. I know many people listening to this are saying, I'm young, I have a big appetite for risk. In general, bonds make sense as a small portion of people's portfolio, even if they're okay with taking a lot of risk.
What are you going to stay away from and why?
Like I said before, the missteps are what you want to avoid. If you could avoid the big missteps, you'll be in a good place financially, the chances are. So what I always avoid is alternative investments. They're opaque. They're typically high fee. They're typically tax inefficient. There is a huge push right now to get people into alternative investments within their 401k, saying it's necessary part of their portfolio. It's such a big part of the economy, such a big part of the market. I'm telling you right now, anybody listening to this, you do not need any alternative investments in your portfolio. You don't need real estate deals. You don't need private equity. You don't need hedge funds. And you certainly don't need private credit. You could do everything and accomplish everything you want to in life through publicly traded markets, stocks, bonds, cash. And there's also this thing where there's a dispersion between the best and worst performers. In the public markets, it's much smaller. So you pick a large cap money manager and his performance is more schwach or not as good as the best performer, but it's by a few percentage points. In the alternative space, typically the best performer and the worst performer are a world apart. Someone could be up 25%. The other person could have wiped you out completely. So it's also about picking those winners. But how are you going to pick those winners? There's no framework for being able to do that. A lot of it's about getting lucky. I'm not saying alternative investments apply to nobody, but I personally stay away from them. Most people should, and leave that to the big institutional investors of the world.
Didn't Madoff do very well for many years?
Extremely well. He only was up 10% every single year without any losses until they found out it was a Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
So I was wondering, how can someone find a broker like that? And then if they did, what's that conversation like?
Like someone who is up that frequently?
Yeah.
Well, generally, if they sell you access, well, you could watch the documentary. Everything they have there, you'll hear at your kiddish club or golf course. And they'll say, so try to sell you access, family and friends discount. I don't normally let people in, but I'll let you in. You have certain net worth, but, I'll do you a favor. Red flags. I mean, that brings me to my next point, where if anyone's trying to sell you something that sounds too good to be true, then you should run for the hills. Many people listening to this podcast may not have a background investing in financial planning. But if something doesn't feel right in your gut, chances are there's something wrong with it. But you know what? Even if you don't understand it, it may make sense. There's plenty of things out there that do make sense, that you are comfortable with, that you could stick with over the long run, and you could go to that. You don't need to be invested in every winning deal of time. If something feels uncomfortable, you'll probably end up avoiding a big mistake if you avoid it. So that's the other one. And there's also the final thing, kind of my framework of looking at things and what do I avoid.
Crypto.
More of a general theme.
Okay.
More of a general thing. I know crypto is a sensitive subject for a lot of people, or a triggering subject.
Hit the comments, boys.
Hit the comments. Is the ability to things I don't understand. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades. I understand what's available in the marketplace. I know what works and I know what doesn't work. And if I don't understand something, it doesn't mean I know everything. I certainly don't. But if I don't understand something, I simply move it to what Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner at Berkshire Hathaway,
We
called.
almost had him on the pod.
You almost. We passed away.
Yeah, but legitimately, we were one
Really?
step away. Yeah.
That guy was awesome. He was just like a quote machine. Everything he said was insightful and succinct. He had the too hard pile, things that he doesn't understand. They may be, again, a perfectly reasonable idea, but it's beyond the scope of what he understands. He doesn't understand the investment thesis. That's perfectly fine. Again, you don't need access to every new idea. You don't need to be on top of every new trend. You need to stick to plain vanilla investments and you'll end up doing well. So if something is that I don't understand, I'll stay away from it. There's actually this quote that I had, if you don't mind, I actually took it with me. There was a speech by Tom Brady. He was inducted into the New England Patriots, I think, Hall of Fame June of last year. And there's a whole speech, which is actually pretty good. And he had this one quote that is one of my favorite now. He said, "To be successful at anything, the truth is you don't have to be special. You just have to be what most people aren't. Consistent, determined, and willing to work for it. There are no shortcuts." This is a great line for life, obviously football, if you're starting a business, and it also applies to investing. You don't need anything special to be successful investing. What you need to do is you need to stick to plain vanilla investments, you need to stick with it over the long term, and you need to ignore the noise. That's it. And if you're able to do that and stay consistent with that, you'll do very, very well financially.
Morgan Housel wrote a book on spending. It's called The Art of Spending. I'm curious, we spoke a lot about investing. How do you plan on spending money in 2026?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's actually a pet peeve of mine. So much of my profession, rightfully so, is focused on investing and saving because it's important. That's how you develop a nest egg to be able to do what you want. But so little of what we discuss is about spending your money. And I always try to tell my clients that money is a tool. It's not a scorecard. You're not going to get a prize if you're the richest person in the graveyard. And if you leave your kids too much money, you'll probably cause more harm than good. And there's this guilt about spending money. I remember, just a quick story, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm spending my money on, is I remember right after I got married, about a year afterwards, we didn't have any kids. We didn't really have much expenses. And I had this vast plan of going on this insane trip. I wanted to go to Paris for a long weekend. Then I wanted to go to Beijing for a few days. And then I wanted to spend about 10 days in Thailand. I remember discussing with people and people were saying, this is a trip for retirement. Why are you going on it now? Why are you spending so much money? Yada, yada, yada. Anyway, I ended up going on the trip. But as you get older, you realize like you only have so much time on this earth, so much healthy time also. People get sick, chas v'shalom. They die early before they would expect. Spend your money to enhance your life now. For me, I don't have many hobbies or interests. I like talking about personal finance. I like watching the Knicks and I like traveling. So my spending beyond my expenses is I'd like to travel. So last year we went on a couple interesting trips. I went to Israel for a simcha, I'm a big road trip guy. So we went on a cool road trip. We did North, South Dakota, parts of Wyoming, Montana. And this year I hope to do the same. I hope to go back to Israel for another simcha, hope to go on another road trip. I have other plans that I might not be able to do this year, but it's really focused on traveling. I also try to do cool experiences. I hadn't been to a basketball game in probably more than a decade. And I decided, you know what? I want to go to a basketball game, but I just don't want to go. I want to get really, really good seats. And I don't spend on clothes. I don't spend on anything. So like I'm going to get good seats. So the Knicks, to get the seats I wanted, were a bit out of my price range. So I ended up going to a Nets game, which was awesome. That whole kosher section, VIP section over there. I was like walking in and out of the same tunnel as the Nets players. And you know what? It was well worth it. I really, really enjoyed that experience. And I would encourage anyone to figure out what they enjoy doing in life. And assuming they can meet their expenses and paying their yeshiva tuition and paying their mortgage and saving for retirement. But beyond that, use your money to enhance your life. You may not have it in retirement to be able to go travel around the world or to do cool things. Spend while you can. So that's my philosophy on spending.
And your experiences over things, right? Sounds like.
Yeah, I'm not a. I'm an experience. I wrote an article in the Jewish Press, spending on things versus experiences, and some people get a lot of enjoyment out of getting a new watch or a new car. That's not me. No judgment. It's just
Yeah.
not my thing. I really enjoy going places and seeing things. That's just my thing.
I was once in the White Shul. Rabbi Eitan Feiner gave a fantastic shir. It was a Shabbos drasha on this idea of not hoarding
Mm,
money, but actually spending it in
mm.
a responsible way.
Yeah,
This idea that we're only saving, saving, saving for retirement. And I've been begging him, I'm going to send Rabbi Feiner this. Please come on and share those stories and messages. I even shared with him I think it was the Wall Street Journal personal finance editor. He's, I don't know what happened, but a year ago he came out with an article that
yeah. I
I'm
saw
very
that.
sick and he was 60 years old and he was sharing his entire life what he's going to do with his money in retirement. And the doctors, gave him X amount of time to live
Yeah,
and he might not even
Jonathan
make,
Clements, right?
could be, yeah,
Yeah.
might not make it even to that point, which fit very well with Rabbi Feiner's message.
I liked his work a lot. He just passed away
Oh,
recently, and
wow.
he was very upfront and almost stoic about his situation and his view on money. He wrote about his diagnosis and situation through the lens of financial planning and investing. So it's worth reading his work to see what he said because it was a very insightful and poignant.
We'll link to that in the episode. Okay, fine. So let's end off on charity in 2026. I know you mentioned how you and your wife navigate that personally, but when I think about charity in 2026, I'm Jonathan Shenkman. What comes to mind?
The first thing I'll say is that just how people need to have a strategy for investing their money and a plan for their finances, you need to have a framework for giving away your money. It's as simple as prioritizing what's important to you. And for people that are Jewish on the call, there may be some halachic ramifications. You may want to read a book or speak to your Rav about, but you should at least prioritize what's important in your life because everyone's inundated with solicitations, especially around this time of year, and you have to figure out what you want to give to. Realistically, you can't give to everybody. So for what we do personally is, unless you're giving away many millions of dollars a year, it's hard to have an impact if you give to to bigger organizations. So we try to give locally to Jewish organizations locally, the shuls, the mikvah, the school, the food bank. This is a way to have a real impact with your dollars that you're going to help real people that you see every day. So we make sure to do that. That's kind of our first tier of
And
giving.
and within that, family before
Correct.
neighbors,
Family's always first. So everyone,
right?
I would say that family's first. If you have a loved one in your family who needs help and are temporarily on hard times, then you should certainly try to help them before anyone else. But figure family issues aside, then I would start focusing locally on the community. The next thing that we focus on is charities in Israel. Especially after our October 7th, seeing all the backlash from people around the world and how anti-Semitic and anti-Israel people are, it just motivated me, probably like a lot of Jews, to really want to support organizations in Israel to the best of our financial ability. Support whether it's the IDF or tangentially related organizations or just people in Israel in general. That
Kol Chabad.
exactly, another wonderful organization that I've definitely contributed to in the past. That is definitely what we wanted to contribute to. So we made sure to support charities in Israel to kind of counteract these crazy people all around the world and their anti-Semitic behavior. And then the last thing is really up for grabs for ever things that catch my interest. Every year, I'll have people that are friends of mine that are doing a bike ride or a marathon for a charity, and I want to support them. A friend of mine may be getting honored by their shul. We want to be able to support them and other interests that it may be of interest at that period of time or that I feel passionate about. So that's the layers or the framework of how we allocate our charitable dollars.
And it could get overwhelming, the amount of links we get to charities that are beautiful, but you're saying if you're strategic, it's not overwhelming because you know how much you can theoretically
You know
allocate.
how much you could give, but we'll look at what our net income was and figure out what the dollar amount is, and then how we want to divvy it up between stuff that we know we're going to give to our local shul and the food bank, which is a set amount that we maybe increase every year, and then what's available for other things. But you know what? Everyone has their own agenda. There are plenty of nonprofits that are going to call you and harass is a strong word, but they're going to go after you very, very hard to give money to the organization and because that's their job. But if it doesn't fit within your framework, then you say no and you have a framework so you don't feel guilty. This doesn't fit within my framework of where I give money to, and that's it. There's nothing more to discuss in that. Don't get bullied by an organization or somebody just because they saying that it's a great organization. There are many great organizations out there, and you need to contribute to things that reflect your values.
Shout out to the Donors Fund, one of the uh, many donor advised
Sure,
funds, but that's
absolutely.
the one that I use. Jonathan, if anyone does want to contact you, email, phone, pick your brain, what's the best way to get in touch?
So email, you could always email me at jonathan@parkbridgewealth.com. I put out a lot of content, pretty much all free unless it's behind a paywall. And you could follow me on social media at Jonathan on Money. You could connect with me on LinkedIn where I post all my content, also all free. I have a monthly newsletter where I include all the work I've been putting out, my webinars, the podcast, which is Jonathan on Money, comes out once a week. And the last thing I'll say, if I may, is I have a book coming out hopefully early next year about
Ooh.
for geared towards children and money. Should have some nice illustrations. So if you're interested in getting notified when that does become available, you could email me with the word book in the subject line, and then when it does become, I'll send out an email.
Okay, let's make sure we announce that on the podcast when it's launched. I'll be happy to
I'm happy to come
plug.
back. Have a whole episode about kids and money.
That's awesome. Jonathan, I cannot thank you enough.
It's an honor to be back here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy with this latest episode, but I want to tell you something. So many of you are listening, but you're not subscribed. So, wink, wink, if you could please fix that. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, drop a comment, click like on the video, click like on the podcast, share it with a friend, and it really helps us tremendously, right? The content's free, so do what you can. How is it free? We have a big thank you to our sponsors. They make these episodes possible. Twillery, they are redefining what men's clothing should feel and look like in 2025 and 2026. Thank you to Bitbean. They are your custom software solution with incredible talent at a fraction of the price it used to be. AI is amazing. Have a conversation with them if your business needs any sort of custom software. If you want to automate anything, speak to the team at Bitbean. Oh, and thank you to Swirly Schoenfeld. He is the business organizer. Think about it like a business therapist. If you WhatsApp him today, you'll start to get the ball rolling on fixing your business once and for all. Be'ezras Hashem, with God's help. Tell him Ellie sent you. That's me. And thank you to Kol Chabad, where you can help the vulnerable in Israel with a much-needed donation. Thank you for supporting our sponsors so we can keep bringing you more wonderful Kosher Money episodes. And I think it's worth taking a look at them. If you don't know where to turn, they'll give you an assessment and then without any agenda, give you the best course of action based on your needs. Again, no agenda. They're not going to earn money off you or your debts. They're a nonprofit. They're just there to help you figure out the right path forward. See the show notes for a link to this amazing new organization. If you need a free Jewish finance coach, look up livingsmarterjewish.org. They've helped thousands of our listeners, and you can be the next one. How awesome is that? A lot of awesome stuff. And now for the fun part. If you want a chance to win Jonathan Shenkman's brand new book, okay, take a look at it. D is for diversification, the ABCs of personal finance. If you're watching on screen, it looks like a kid's book, but I kind of think that it's more than a kid's book. I think it's for teenagers. That's who I think it's for. It's got pictures, a letter for each one. M is for markets. Markets are places where people come together to buy and sell things like toys, food, or even pieces of companies. Now, an 8-year-old could understand that. So, you have a smart kid or a teenager that wants to learn stuff. I think if they knew everything in this book, it's kind of cute. I just ordered one and it helps support our guest. So that's kind of cool. We'll put a link to the show notes. You can get the book on jonathanonmoney.com. There's an Amazon link. If you wanted the chance to win one of these 3 free books that we are giving away, comment on this video using either the word money or investing or Jonathan. We'll pick 3 of you to win and we'll send you out a book. Congratulations to a YouTube user named at Tell Me Something Interesting. That's their name. Tell Me Something Interesting. They just won a $100 Amazon gift card because they commented on YouTube on our Health Share episode that we ran 2 weeks ago. Reach out to us on livinglechaim.com to claim your $100 Amazon gift card if your username is at Tell Me Something Interesting. Oh, and by the way, livinglechaim.com is brand new. You're not going to believe it. Take a look. Sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter with all the latest from Living L'Chaim. The website is stunning. Great job by the team. But you've heard enough from me. I want you to go out there and do something productive. I'll talk to you later.
Living L'Chaim.